Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Dave, and sitting next to me is Rob. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm just fine, thanks. Even better now that you're here.
Great. So I figured we would talk about box office inflation numbers. What I'm getting at is Avengers Endgame came out about 3 weeks ago.
Did that come out? Was that a thing?
Well, by the time I get done editing this, it might be 5 weeks old already. But the point is, it's breaking records. Huge amounts of money it's making. It's still not topping number one for domestic yet, or even worldwide. But we're not going to look at worldwide numbers. We're going to just look at domestic numbers, because when you start doing the adjusted for inflation stuff, they didn't track world numbers for some of those movies back then. So it's strictly USA money there.
So the whole point of this basically is when people go around and they want to say this movie was better than this movie, a lot of times what people will use for physical evidence is box office take. How many people voted with their dollars? The problem being, if you are in a different time, your money was worth a different amount. So the way that we try to objectively, as much as possible, put things into context is by running the numbers of the box office take for movies not of the current day through the inflation calculator to find out what it would have grossed today. After that, then you have to try to put things into context based on recessions and things like that might have kept people out of the box office, or what else was going on at the same time, which
right.
certainly is credible too.
And the reason why I bring this up is because Avengers, like I said, is breaking all sorts of records. Where it stands right now, Avengers Endgame is at $734 million on a domestic level.
That's a lot of money.
It is. It's right in front of Avatar at the moment. It passed something. It did pass Titanic. I just don't know if it was directly behind it. But it's catching up to Avatar, and it's got to get to The Force Awakens, past like 934 million. But I don't think it'll hit that. I could be wrong. But
again, we're comparing dollars to dollars rather than the value of the dollar relative to what it was worth at the day. So,
and the thing is, a movie like Endgame comes out, and everybody is quick to be like, well, technically it didn't make that much money.
Why don't we actually take a hack at the list, and then we'll talk about what that means.
Okay, so
that's what people are waiting for. People love top 10 lists, or however many you've got.
The reason why I figured this would be kind of a fun topic is people always want to say, well, that technically that movie's not that great because X movie is better because when you take it to the inflation calculator, it made this much. However, there are other factors in there, like competition was different in these eras, that these movies made big dollar values to them. And we could talk about that as we go through the list. And we could even say if we saw any of these movies or not, and then say if we liked them or didn't like them. I don't know.
I don't like my chances, but it will be fascinating if I have seen several of these movies. I'll be happy with myself.
All right, so number 10 for adjusted
this is current,
for inflation.
Right?
This is
current
at least up to date to a certain point. Yeah, like 17, 18 maybe.
Okay.
Box Office Mojo is pretty good at this stuff.
Sure. So
number 10, I'm going to read what its inflation number would be. That way it sounds really super big.
Well, absolutely.
Number 10, 1937's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Oh, sure.
With adjusted for inflation, it is at $982 million.
Wow.
Its original gross would have been $184 million.
Yeah, inflation will kick you in the teeth if you don't watch it.
So that came out in 1937,
and
the average price for a movie ticket back in 1937 was 25 cents.
Sure.
Now,
that's a lot of tickets.
There was a couple factors with that. 1937. What else could people do for entertainment?
Try not to worry about the World War. So distractions like that would have been pretty darn nice.
So radio existed. Maybe people tuned into their radio shows.
Was that Disney's first full-length feature
animation
with audio?
So. I believe so.
So at the very least, novelty was a huge factor too.
Right.
And it had no competition.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And it was at a point where everybody was worried and wanted to take their minds off of the war.
And that competition is something Disney is currently doing.
Well, yes.
But
Different ways of doing it. You could innovate and beat everybody to it, or you can just buy them eventually.
Yeah. So the other thing I was thinking of, radio, sports. People were probably more watching sports then. But then
baseball was the great American pastime because it was inexpensive and you could go to the ball game and stay there for 3 hours.
Plays maybe, but
sure.
Again, the competition was less in 1937, and this is probably marketed for kids more so than the adults.
So, totally.
So you got to factor in that there's this movie coming out, bring all the kids to it. Great. Also, I believe these numbers also include reissues, so this is their total gross.
Oh, okay.
So a movie like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs that came out in 1937, that thing's not seeing VHS until the 1980s. So the only way...
And even after it came out on VHS, Disney was vaulting that stuff. Yeah. So it wasn't constantly available either.
Yeah, so you have that movie come out, and then throughout the several years...
So does this include VHS sales too?
Oh, no, just box office.
Just box office. So yeah. So for the longest time, if you wanted to see this movie, you had to go and see it in the theaters. All viewings basically contributed to this number.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of a privileged place that will keep it on the list throughout cinematic history. Doesn't also hurt that, I mean, there's a certain timelessness about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's a fairy tale that everybody can understand. It's nearly universal. Yeah, I'm not surprised to see that on the list at all. And yes, I did see that in the theater.
I did not. I don't think I've even seen it. I think it was one of those that I owned but didn't see it.
My hometown theater actually occasionally would take classic movies like Disney and put it through the projectors. It was pretty cool.
Nice.
Saw Bambi that way too.
I remember when Bambi was reissued in the mid-'80s, but I didn't see it.
That's when I saw it.
Number 9.
Ooh, number 9.
1973.
Ooh.
The Exorcist.
Oh.
$996 million with the inflation adjustment.
Wow.
Its original take would be $232 million. Ticket price in 1973 was on the average of $1.77.
I honestly did not expect to see horror titles in this. Well, I did not. And I've seen The Exorcist.
Yeah, I remember back then when that came out too, that was billed as like the scariest movie you'll ever see.
Yes, I do remember hearing people having heart attacks watching that in the theater. It was so scary. I actually saw it in a seminary.
Oh, wow. Nice. True. Educational?
True. No. Although I wish I could have gone to classes where they teach about doing exorcisms. That would have been awesome. Would have helped my D&D career. But anyhow. Yeah, and another thing too, that's an important movie to keep in context because we've done horror to death these days. A lot of people are really jaded. But when you go back and you wonder why things like, Hitchcock stuff, people are like, that's not scary. You didn't have people who were jaded into oblivion with horror. They scared themselves because the movie led you to it. In The Exorcist, I think you were starting to see some of the first practical horror effects that really jumped off the screen so you would not have it inferred. Like the shower scene in Psycho, you didn't see anybody get stabbed. You saw the blood run down the shower. In this, you saw somewhat gruesome things on the head turning, puking up the soup.
The cross,
all that stuff. And not only were people generally more spiritual back then, we've turned a bit more secular these days. Yeah, it was again, innovative. But putting it in this context, I think, is important because without that context, it's really hard to understand how that got to be number 9.
Well, in 1973, televisions existed back then.
This is true.
So now you're dealing with the dynamic of, do I stay at home and watch whatever's on TV in 1973?
To be fair, though, not a lot of movies showed on TV back then.
Correct.
It was mostly about news, sports, and programming.
TV shows. Like cop dramas or whatever.
Exactly. You didn't get to see, HBO,
but
where you could watch movies on demand.
Right. It still could prevent you from being like, do I go to the movie or do I just stay at home and chill with my beer?
No doubt that there was competition there, more so than Snow White had, but that's still pretty compelling numbers for an early horror movie.
Yes. And back then you got, what else? Again, sports still, baseball was still a thing back then in 1973. Plays and concerts. It was just, there's not much grabbing for people for their entertainment value. So
This is true, and people were also coming out of the 60s, too. So, you know, people were going into a more leave the flower children behind, you know, go get a job, be professional and stuff. And your flights of fancy were basically, you know, going and catching a movie.
1965, number 8, Dr. Zhivago.
Dr. Zhivago.
There, I'll go with that cut.
Well, yes. Dr. Zhivago.
It made $1,118,000,000.
Wow.
And it's total $1,100 million, and for $1.01 average ticket price.
Yep. You could still find movies back then for matinee would be a quarter, but you could go for $1 at a small town theater, no problem. That came out, you know, 60s, so well before I was born. My father tried to get me to watch the movie, and he sat me down and played the movie, but I had my nose in a book, and I don't remember a thing about it. So
I don't think I've seen it.
My dad liked it, but I couldn't tell you anything about it.
I think it's one of those movies, I see the cover, and I'm like, I should watch it. In fact, I think it's on Netflix.
Ooh.
Or at least it used to be.
Well, we have to check into that.
It used to be. So I don't know anything about the movie, but again, the competition to grab for your entertainment value back then.
There was probably some big innovation about it, either because of genre or theme or some element that hooked people and brought them in.
Now, again,
do you know who starred in it?
Oh no, I do not offhand.
Well, sometime we'll have to look that up. Maybe we'll make that in a review sometime.
Yeah, if I've never seen it, you've never seen it.
It's right for us to review.
Why not, right? The fascinating thing too, I was looking at with going back number 8 through number 10, that was still before VHS. So These movies, if they weren't airing on television, guess what? They were getting reissues.
Yeah.
So number 7, we're going to 1975.
Ooh.
And this one's one of my favorite movies, my personal top 10, Jaws.
Okay.
And its adjusted intake is $1,153,000,000 for and its total gross is $260 million. And $2.05 for an average price of a movie ticket.
Obviously going up as time goes on, but yeah. You know, what can I say? I said I was shocked to see a horror movie in the top 10, and here's another one. Although some people will argue...
Slightly different.
Some people will argue that it's not as much horror, but let's face it, it's a monster movie.
Remember Hollywood Video?
Yeah. I worked at Hollywood Video. It's hard to forget.
Sorry, I remember they had Jaws in the action section.
And an argument could be made for that as well, but honestly... I still think I mentally classify it as horror. And again, you had a movie that basically kind of created its own subgenre. A lot of action/horror movies. Some people thought King Kong, I'm sure, thought it was kind of a horrific idea, putting yourself in the position of huge ape steals girl.
Yeah.
She doesn't die. Not a lot of people die, but it's still, oh my gosh, this alien-esque, even if it's familiar looking.
What are you talking about, dude? People are on a pit and broke, bridge fell down.
People died. Nothing gory or anything, but that wasn't the thing. Now with Jaws, you saw, again, ramped up to another level, people getting nommed in the water. Mm-hmm. You had to use your imagination as they thrashed around.
There's that scene where the leg does drop down into the...
Yep, that's true.
So yeah, and again, that one's competition. 1975, we still don't have VHS or beta, whatever have you. You also have some, I think that's probably when you start getting movies, like real movies playing on TV here and there, but probably not for a couple of years after. Jaws probably would not be on TV. But again, that's probably something that went through a couple reissues.
I'm sure.
Until it settled with a VHS.
Mm-hmm.
And, you could either
stay... By then, you'd also have Laserdisc and other ways of seeing Jaws, so...
Laserdiscs. Never considered that one, but so few people had those.
My dad had it on Laserdisc. Jaws is out.
I would be jealous of you if this were 1995.
I'd be jealous if I could get my hands on it and get a new needle so it would work.
You still have it?
I don't know what happened to it.
Oh,
my brother probably has it.
All right, so that was number 7.
Yeah.
Number 6, The 10 Commandments.
Sure, classic.
$1,180,000,000. And of course, its total gross is $65 million. Talk about a big gap.
That shows how inflation goes.
1956, and its average ticket price was 50 cents.
Cecil B. DeMille's classic. It was a great way of guaranteeing at least a certain amount of success if you put it in with something like, the religious theme, because you guarantee a certain amount of audience is going to come for that. Great movie. I've seen that myself.
I haven't.
Really?
Yeah, I own it too.
And the thing is too, it's one of those penetrating movies that even if you haven't seen it, there are things that you've seen clips from it, you've probably heard sound bites from it and stuff. It's just one of those kind of movies, and it probably wouldn't surprise you that I saw that one in the seminary too.
Well, talk about a difference.
It wasn't compulsory, and the friar that I saw it with actually kind of tore some of it down for its Hollywood gussing up of certain things, and he wasn't a fan. He was not a fan. So, and it's interesting watching the friar sitting next to you who's bad at it. Oh my god!
The competition again for your entertainment value back then, you're dealing with television just coming out.
Yeah.
And back then, Hollywood was really afraid of that scenario.
Sure.
TV is going to stop people from going to the movie theaters.
Just like the VCR was a threat, same way.
Yeah, or whatever new technology there is nowadays.
And honest to God, I think if you really look at it objectively, movie theaters are movie theaters' own biggest threats.
Yes. So for competition, I wrote down TV, sports, maybe plays, and Elvis. I don't know why I threw Elvis in there, but
it's good. It's good to remember the different layers of culture were going on at the time, and quite honestly, going with a theme archly religious is a stab at the counterculture, which Elvis was a provocateur. He was a very aggressive push of driving the culture forward. It's only fairly understandable to see something reactionary in the case of something having, that goes back to classic traditions, like the Ten Commandments, putting it into its context, of course. Out of curiosity, do you know when Ben-Hur came out, how close it was to that?
Ben-Hur came out in 1959.
Okay, so just 3 years later. Considering that things moved a lot slower than they do today, they're practically contemporary. So, it fits within the same time period. Of course, for as impressive as the Ten Commandments were, considering the limitations of effects and things of the time, Ben-Hur turned around and became the biggest cinematic spectacle in that era. Considering horses died and people got it was pretty serious stuff. Committing to that piece. So
at the end of this, I'm curious and to see where it falls in the inflation area, because that list for the inflation is huge. I just grabbed the top 10, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Number five.
In
my lifetime. We're finally in something in my lifetime, and obviously your lifetime.
Yeah, so far the one from 1975 was also in my lifetime, but
this one's in both of ours at least.
There we go. Let's do it.
1997.
Oh.
Really? Titanic.
Yeah, Titanic. Truly a Titanic movie.
$1,221,000,000 for its adjusted gross.
That's a hell of a movie.
Its total domestic original intake, granted, it did have one reissue, $659 million. And average ticket prices back then were $4.59.
Well, that's one of your favorite movies, Dave.
It is my favorite movie.
It is your favorite movie, Dave.
It is my favorite movie.
And
I know it's not historically accurate, but it was never intended to be. And the history stuff, the science stuff with the ship sinking, that was what it was back then. That's what people thought. Science now has determined it sank differently. Even the James Cameron guy admits that himself. As for the historical elements sprinkled throughout the movie, those were true items in there. Not the Jack and Rose stuff.
I love it when you get defensive about things that nobody is accusing anything of anymore.
Oh, I hear people. Stepson. That movie's not true, Well, yeah, I know.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, there were a lot of big movies that out in 97 too. We've covered some of that, but what can you say?
I saw it 9 times in the theater.
Dave and millions of housewives loved this movie and saw it over and over and over again.
Yeah. I did.
It's not my favorite, but I can certainly appreciate its place. I can also appreciate that You could have taken Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio, given them the same script, different scenario, and you could have probably spun this movie off and still had success.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I mean, the set was gorgeous. They did an amazing recreation of the Titanic. That was really cool, especially when they went, off of all the glitzy stuff that you got all the pictures of, and they showed you what the steam room might have looked like, and and all the stuff that you don't normally see.
Yeah,
it looked alive. It looked livable, breathable, which was cool. But honestly, it was about Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet,
and Billy Zane.
Heck of a story, and dialogue, believable charisma, and a connection that made that movie go. How much of it was because of the scene? And I'm not getting into what the scene is, but you know what the scene is.
That's not why I went to it 9 times.
But how might that have changed it if that scene wasn't in it? I don't know. I obviously wouldn't have completely obviated it, but I guarantee you, if you look back on how often the movie has been viewed, you could take that 1 minute of time and see that's been viewed more times than any other part of the movie by a long shot, because people are people.
Yeah, I only went to Titanic because of Bill Paxton, and then I ended up liking the movie, so I went again
and again
and again
and again
and again
and again.
Now, competition is different in this scenario. We're talking 1997.
Oh, yeah.
Your entertainment value dollar, because all the movies that I mentioned below, from 10 Commandments, Jaws, Dr. Zhivago,
Sure.
The Exorcist, maybe Snow White, depending if Disney had it in the vault or not, you could watch those on VHS.
Yes.
In that time frame.
Yes.
We could go to Hollywood Video. I want to rent Jaws in the action section, and I could watch Jaws, or I could go to Titanic. Clearly, I went to Titanic, but you get what I'm talking about here. Yeah. Television has also adapted and evolved by 1997. The various networks, HBO. I mean, people could literally. There are people who chose to stay home because I can do whatever I want at home. I can pause, I can play, I can, whatever. If I'm watching TV commercials, fine, I get up, do whatever I got to do then. So that's where the competition starts to change. So when Titanic made the amount of money that it made, people were quick to jump. This is the first time I've ever heard this. People were quick to jump at, well, yeah, but adjusted for inflation, the number one movie actually made the most money. It's like, well, that's not the point. Competition's different.
I think what you saw in that time period was kind of an ugly thing where, again, movie fans, and we talked about this with movie fandom, is often striated and sliced up by what I like, and what I don't like is inferior. You hear derogatory terms like chick flick and things like that, and it's never a compliment, because it's not the movie you would watch, for example. So, and I think that's a thing that a lot of people had a hard time grasping, is they thought that the blockbusters were going to be action movies and spy movies and James, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it took a lot of people to realize, oh, wow, a lot of women watch these movies too, and don't feel alienated out of this movie because there's a strong male character, but also a strong female character involved too. I think that had a huge amount of impact on that, among other things. I mean, I'm not saying that's exclusively it, but that drew a lot of audience. Yeah. And if you remember, 98, 99 was littered with movies that tried to recapture the magic of Titanic and failed utterly.
Yeah, well,
utterly.
That's a whole other topic in itself.
We will cover it at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, you could just go, okay, the decade this was popular, then everybody else did it. Yes.
A modern day example of that would be things like 50 Shades of Grey. How many people have said this is trash? This movie is, it still did good box office business. The Twilight movies, for as many people as look at it and say this is culturally bankrupt and a terrible movie, it made bank at the box office.
The difference between Twilight and 50 Shades, though, Twilight kept its numbers stable. 50 Shades dropped.
Even so, they got butts in the seats, sold a lot of tickets for something that in different time periods nobody would have gone to see.
Oh my gosh, that'd be like Skinamax for 20 years ago. That's what 50 Shades of Grey is, people. But anyways, number four. Kind of my lifetime. I think it came out before I was born, but like literally by like a month or two or three. E.T.
Sure.
Its unadjusted gross is
What year was that?
1982.
Oh, jeez.
One
I saw that in the theater.
$1,278,000,000, and the average ticket price was $2.94. Its top gross is $435 million. There was a reissue of that. I did see it in the theater when it came out for its 20th anniversary.
Sure. One of the major things that I took away from E.T. was the movie, hands down to me, that celebrated merchandising. Because when it came out, it was E.T. everything, and they shoehorned so many product shots into E.T. Reese's Pieces were freaking everywhere.
Well,
because that's what he gave him. All the things, all the product shots that were in that just blew up.
I believe Eminem turned them down.
Maybe so, but boy, was that a
Reese's was
mistake,
like,
wasn't
whoa,
it? Because would Reese's Pieces maybe be anything anymore if it wasn't for the massive exposure and everybody eating them at that time?
Maybe not.
They are tasty, though.
Yeah. No.
I do have a soft spot for that. Also, to me, important, opening scenes of E.T., Elliot is his older brothers playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, after a couple game nights with you and then going back and watching that movie, I was like, oh, I get it now.
Yes.
and I believe that. And that particular story arc with kids has just been recreated recently several times, with success, actually, with either Super 8 that came out in 2008, I think, and no, that was like late. I don't know when that came out. That came out sometime.
Well, even something like The Iron Giant that came out had some elements to it.
Stranger Things is essentially another one of those love letters to Spielberg and E.T. And I mean, the kids.
Sure. They throw love letters everywhere.
Those kids in Stranger Things are exactly what the kids in the beginning of E.T. are doing.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, I like that movie. The only thing I remember of the merchandise was the leftovers because I was only a baby.
I remember the Atari game.
Ooh, did you have it?
I did. We had the Atari game, E.T., and yeah, that game sucked. It was a bad game.
Did you ever find that documentary on Netflix about
I
that?
did find the documentary, and I did watch it.
They actually found the stuff.
They did find all the E.T. cartridges.
They thought it was a joke. They're like, and they're holy shit, we found it.
Yeah, well, if you can emulate it, don't bother to buy it. It's not a good game by any stretch of the imagination. But honestly, I blame the people who drafted it, not the person who made it, who had 2 weeks working by himself to make it. It wasn't a very good game. The movie itself, I thought was okay. I wasn't a huge fan. I thought for all the coolness of having an alien, let's see, you could heal Elliot. He didn't do a lot because you were fairly limited practical effects with what you could do with E.T. The neck could go up and down. He could waddle like R2-D2 with his rollers frozen. He reminded me a little bit of Clyde from Any Which Way But Loose. He kind of walked like an orangutan a little bit with the legs just were not suited for striding. So he kind of had this dumpy, chunky waddle. And the long arms, he kind of looked like a space hairless orangutan. But then the extending neck thing. They went with the big eyes for E.T. so that you would get that kind of sense of, oh, it's cute, rather than this is a hideous thing that looks like I'm not going to exactly get into what his neck and head resemble going up and down like that, but there's been unkind comparisons.
I remember, I thought, E.T. is a good movie. I'm going to show my young child E.T.
How'd you take it?
Freaked out.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to show my son that one either.
Yeah.
Also, too, it was one of those weird kids movies where a lot of times not so, I don't know, obfuscated, but all the parents looked like, pretty scary. All the adults were the villains, it seemed like.
Well, not the mom.
Yeah, the mom, but
E.T.'s mom. I met her. She's very nice.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
The competition for 1982, VCRs probably were just starting to come out, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Probably not quite there yet, but they're, the rich people might have them or whatever.
They were very expensive, yes.
Or robbed down the street, maybe. And then, you got your TV. When we're jumping around the years.
Movies came out in 92?
In 82?
Yeah.
Oh, a lot of movies came out in 82.
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't a time when it was isolated to just a few movies.
Just like
it
Titanic. just like, was it Titanic and E.T., I think it's fair to say you had multiple movies coming out. And some movies stayed in theaters a lot longer back then. So E.T. could be competing with Raiders of the Lost Ark for a little bit, you know?
Sure.
Which gives you, like, how long things stayed in theaters, too.
The other thing, too, that was nice about E.T. is it launched a lot of iconic moments that still kind of sit in the public. Anytime you see a boy riding a bicycle with a basket superimposed over the moon, you immediately think E.T.
Yep.
Some people, when they look at Reese's Pieces and eat them, they think about E.T. It worked well at earning that iconic status. And
Yeah, it's good to leave a trail of Reese's Pieces everywhere. And
Something
for
like
competition back then, too, arcades. What were arcades like in 82? Tron came out in 82. That's right.
Yep.
Arcades were a thing. Could that compete against somebody's entertainment value dollar?
Not for the family value.
Not for the family value.
No, the family would not go out to the arcade. Kids would go in with their money, young adults, but when it came to bring the family to go and see a Disney movie, arcades really were distant. Not much at all.
Number 3.
We're
going back to 1965.
Ooh.
The Sound of Music.
Yes.
It's
the hills are alive with the sound of music.
Its adjusted gross is $1,283,000,000.
Oh yeah.
Its original gross is $159 million, and the average ticket price, again, $1, because we already had a movie from 1965 with Dr. Zhivago.
Right.
So we have a double bill in our top 10 adjusted.
Which tells you a lot of people back in 65 were watching movies.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Again, the reissuing, too.
Sure. That was a movie that had been reissued, and also that was one of the movies that was the earliest to get to TV and be viewed over and over and over again, which is how I saw it.
Okay.
Yeah, musicals, there's a reason why musicals stay, there's no time period where musicals haven't been frozen out, from Greek choral, live performances to today. It's a huge medium, and it's something timeless.
The mid 80s to the late 90s, there's probably a lull in like musicals. They weren't coming out. Now they're coming out like left and right again.
Yes, but quite honestly, there's no point in time where musicals just stop.
Right.
There's always somebody who's going to put a musical out.
I'm not thinking properly. I keep forgetting that Disney movies like Little Mermaid,
sure,
Beauty and the Beast, those are technically musicals. Aladdin,
Absolutely.
Those are musicals. So musicals didn't die. It's just what happened in the mid 80s through the 90s was they didn't do a whole lot of live action ones.
Yeah.
But now they are. In fact, those animated ones I just mentioned, they're all getting an adaptation for live action. So,
and here's the thing too with The Sound of Music: if you took the Broadway recreations too, you just took it away from the original that you're referencing, that franchise in general, how it's been done so many different times, that would blow almost everything out of the water if you added everything up. The only thing that would give it a run for its money is all the merchandising they throw out today. But of course, we're also not taking away the cost on all the advertising that they do too.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other thing.
That would be a huge thing to get into.
So now we're to our last 2 films of our adjusted for inflation grosses.
Number 2.
1977.
Woo, I was born. No, I was born in 74, so.
We're looking at, it's still making several movies now, TV shows. It's got a life to itself. It's got a fan base that just absolutely loves it to the point where they hate it. We're talking about Star Wars.
Yeah, Star Wars. It's kind of hard to believe that we're going on box office and it's still in the top 10 when there are so many of its offspring that have been drawing more and more people into the theaters, but yet they still can't catch up to the original in terms of adjusted.
Correct. Yeah. You're right. They cannot. They'd have to make nearly $2 billion, but
there's another thing though.
Worldwide total though.
This is obviously also including the revised re-release too.
Yes.
So,
and Star Wars is another one of those in 1977 before VHSs had frequent re-releases. In fact, Lucas even re-released each ones before the sequels again, which was essentially the special editions in 97 were. But, before Empire came out, he would reissue Star Wars with the new title.
The thing is,
for A New Hope.
Yes. The thing is, it's almost not fair because when he re-released them, those had the same level of build-up, anticipation, and follow-through as most movies get once.
Correct.
That's why you don't see modern movies on this list, because he's had numerous bites at the apple, all at various scaling levels of the inflation.
Mm-hmm.
He's taken a whack at it when it was the dollar wasn't as inflated, and the people who went to see it and then went to see it again and went to see it again, even though they weren't paying as much, we're comparing it on a fair scale with inflation. And then he's had another release and another release, and all of these adding up.
I think when he re-released
it's really hard to do.
When he re-released them in '97, I believe the original Star Wars did over $100 million at the box office, which is very, even back in '97, unusual for a re-release like that. But I remember it was a big deal. Came out in February back in the old days when February was boring time for movies. So
yeah, spelled the end of Wizards.
Yes, it did.
Yes. But yeah, and I don't think we really need to go into what it did to the landscape culturally. I mean, that's well documented. We've talked in the past.
Yep. Off the mic, we've talked about that.
Sure, but we've talked about it on this podcast too. What fandom and just huge status cinematically Star Wars has. Disney buying it was a huge deal. When they're now re-releasing it, even though people grumble about it and complain bitterly and say they hate it, they still go to see it.
Right.
So that's and Disney can keep taking whacks at. They can throw in a movie like Solo that they didn't expect to do fantastically. Why? Because they can. And if they can catch lightning in a bottle again, they can take all the tries they want. Because nobody else can do Star Wars. And apparently, Star Trek still doesn't seem like they're competing with them right now. So they've got a clean slate.
They got their stuff in television, but Star Trek has always had the advantage in television compared to the movies.
Let's see how they do now that Disney has it. Once Disney starts churning out TV stuff, let's take a look.
We'll see.
It'll be interesting.
But I think I forgot to mention its unadjusted box office gross is $460 million. The average ticket price for 1977 was $2.23, which, because I have a movie from '97 on here, when they reissued them in '97, you're looking at $4.59. So that's the ticket price literally doubled in that 2 years on average.
Between 1977 and 1997. So 20 years.
Yeah.
That's not surprising. We went through the Reagan era.
Right. So,
inflation kind of went a little crazy.
But that just kind of shows you that, like, in that $100 million that it made in that reissue, it's about the ticket price was twice as much. So you're paying for two people.
Sure, and that's also probably including the take from, like when Episode 7 came out. There were a lot of showings of the original Star Wars and all of those in order in some cases.
I got a bonus movie to talk about in this list too.
Sure, but I mean, so many bites at the apple. So many people have gone to the theaters to see that movie. I've been in a theater and seen the movie in '97. I saw that. Mm-hmm. And yeah,
the worst thing about going to a reissued movie like that, the kid behind you has seen it 100 times.
Oh God, yes.
Acting it out. The kid, when I went to Jedi, the kid during the battle scene was acting out the battles.
Oh God.
Number one, the biggest movie of all time. 1939.
Yes.
Gone with the Wind.
Yes, indeed.
$1,822,000,000 for its adjusted gross. Its unadjusted is $200 million. 1939. 23 cents to see a movie. Now, when you think of Gone with the Wind here,
yes,
there's a lot of factors with this movie that's made this much money, sold this many tickets. For one, when it came out, I believe it was pretty popular. Whereas, if I understand correctly, Wizard of Oz
pretty popular
was not as popular.
Pretty popular. It was huge, Dave.
Huge.
For a lot of the same reasons that the Titanic was huge. It was a period piece. Mm-hmm. It was a strong romance, strong female, strong male, great charisma, great, almost a timeless relationship that the two actors were able to put forth on the stage. The set pieces were excellent. It was what year did that come out again?
39.
Oh yeah. Wasn't there a war going on then too? Exactly. World War II. People were still kind of stuck in that I need something to release from all this stress because things are going really bad over in Europe, and let's go out and see a movie for 20 some cents.
Yeah.
And that again was something probably there were romantic elements in it, but something that you could still bring the family to. So again, I'm not surprised that that's a winning formula.
Yeah.
Have you seen Gone with the Wind?
No, but I owned it, or I still own it. I don't know.
What a shock.
But
you should see it. It doesn't hold up to your modern movie watcher. It'll seem slow and stodgy, unless you are into character pieces where you are watching, the relationships and you enjoy period pieces, which you might like it. You like Titanic. Honestly, I think you got a good chance in this one.
Right. And again, you're looking at 39. That movie had a lot of reissues through the years.
Oh, yes.
And that's how it built up the stuff. I mean, 39 TVs don't come out for till the mid 50s, maybe. VHS doesn't come out till the 80s, and then from that certain point, maybe it might have been on TV once or twice, but you're still looking at something that's just constantly.
It went through the theaters many times, and was passed on generation to generation too. That's another important thing to remember. This was another one of those movies when, in a period where people weren't making movies with women in mind, they went out and, they watched these movies and helped to inflate the numbers. And an underserved audience generally through the period when all the money is thrown at the movies that appeal to men, because the assumption is that the guys are going to see these movies. Some of the biggest, most successful movies have been ones that there's a reason to watch it for men and women.
Yeah.
And again, it's lightning in a bottle, and not everybody can do it. I'd be fascinated to find out what tried to imitate it back in the 40s.
Oh, there's probably a lot
I'm
of movies.
sure there are.
I mean, if you look at the just the cover art, the poster work for a lot of films that are not Gone with the Wind, after Gone with the Wind, they all look pretty darn identical.
They did. There's probably no shortage of imitators, but I'd be fascinated to go back and look at that.
But what started the idea of this topic too was just this concept that some people just try to tear down Endgame for making all this money. Any of the current blockbusters, whether it was The Dark Knight or whatever was making the big dollar within the last couple of years, they always go back to, well, Gone with the Wind technically made all this money, which in fairness, okay, you get that, but you're looking at different time period, different circumstances, different this or that, different entertainment grabbing for you for your dollar value. Mm-hmm. And so when Endgame as an example is breaking all these records, I don't think anything should be taken away from it. Yeah, it's still via inflation. Gone with the Wind may be the big movie, but if you take that inflation out, it's $700 million is still a lot of money.
It's a decent amount,
especially with all the current movies coming out.
One of the things that's going to be really hard for Endgame to stand out in the annals of history is, number one, it's part of a bigger thing. You look at almost all of the movies that you've covered so far, and you're getting the first movies of series or ones that practically could stand alone because the other movies in the series weren't that movie by a stretch, like Jaws. You've seen Jaws 2, Jaws 3, Jaws 4, Jaws 5. They're not Jaws.
There's no 5.
I thought there was.
Nope, you want to count one of the videos.
Jaws NATO. Fine, whatever.
There's a clown NATO now.
Oh, God. Anywho, they weren't the original.
I like part 2. Part 2 is awesome because I like horror films. Mm-hmm. And Jaws was a freaking Michael Myers just in the water. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because he had teenagers and he had we're teenagers. There's a shark coming after us. Oh, sure.
No. But with Endgame, the Endgame is a phenomenon because it doesn't stand on its own. If you watch it in a vacuum, you won't get this movie. You need the other movies. You need to know these other characters because it jumps in.
Right.
This is the spoiler-free zone, by the way. It jumps in and all the characters are already bantering and dialoguing because you've seen them built up from all the other movies. It can't stand on its own. Therefore, it may do well in the box office, extremely well. And goodness, I hope so, because that's going to keep the franchises going. It's going to keep this out there, and it's something that I think is a good thing for people. But Will it stand the test of time? Boy, that's going to be really hard to say. There's not a lot of movies that can say they will. Who knows? When Disney reboots Marvel, they will at some point. I think it's kind of hard to get away from that. At some point, Disney, the way they have structured things out, they will ride this train as far as they can. Eventually, the actors will want to get off the train. You've already heard grumblings and things about different actors who don't want to be re-signed, don't want to do more Marvel stuff. There's a couple of cracks going on in the otherwise nice picture.
But Endgame is called Endgame for a reason.
Correct. But here's the thing. They'll eventually reboot a lot of this stuff. And then will the reboots wipe away a lot of the... Is this pop culture that's easily consumable and then forgotten about? Making a ton of money, but will it stand the test of time? I don't know about that. But it is really good, and it's fun to enjoy it while it's here.
I think if Batman can stand out yet, like Burton's Batman, Star Wars is still doing its thing. Yeah, I think it'll still be there in the next 10 plus years. However, the second you get that one bad movie that not everybody likes, then everyone turn into a negative Nelly.
See, I believe that the pop culture pool is finite. There's only so many movies that our cultural consciousness can hold at a time. Mm-hmm. Really great movies that people have loved for ages have kind of fallen by the wayside and are forgotten by generations that keep going and try to push their stuff up. Avatar will be forgotten in the trash bin of history before very long. Trust me on this. But, some of these movies that we're talking about now are still celebrated because they had something. And, that specialness is something to make note of and figure out why they succeeded. And, all these movies, theaters, production studios and things try to capture this lightning again and again and again. So few do it. But if you look back, we've looked at trends and we've looked at circumstances that have gotten these numbers to happen. I think it's safe to say in a lot of cases, because the Hollywood machine just keeps turning out more and more and more, and they're not interested in revisiting the old. Do you think we're going to see the Marvel movies reissued in theaters? No, because theaters are I hate to say this, Dave, but they're kind of getting close to being a dying venue. The thing that'll be the nail in the coffin is when one of these major production studios, maybe it'll be Disney, maybe it won't, who has their own digital streaming service says, you know what, this isn't going to be direct to video. This is going to be a quality product, but we don't care about the theaters. It's going to be a while because things like, wanting to get that Oscar or wanting to be in the buzz for awards and everything, it's going to be interesting to see if they make the move first to open it up and allow something that doesn't break into the theaters to get in the buzz for those nominations. Be interesting because the moment that happens, some of these places are going to go, you know what, we want to get eyeballs on our channel and we're going to make something so big that everybody's going to want to see it and we're going to have it on our channel alone.
And they might even charge like $15 to view it.
Oh, well, no, it'll be part of your package.
No, I think they'll do special, like you'll have the package where you can watch all the basic stuff, mm-hmm. but they might actually have something. This is premiering here on Disney Plus. Guess what, guys? You want to watch it old-fashioned pay-per-view style? You got to pay like an additional.
Perhaps. I mean, this is speculation. They could do it either way, but if you want to line up those subscriptions, mm-hmm. you make sure that 1 month subscription comes with that movie. You're guaranteeing that, and when you do that, you're going to hook people into seeing your product.
Yeah.
Now tell me that isn't a business model Disney gets behind already.
They're there.
It's only a matter of time before somebody is willing to make that huge movie and then commit it to their exclusive platform. And once that happens, I don't know if theaters have a chance after that. Not the way that home theaters are, not the way that, people have kind of rebelled against the theater format for all except the big blockbusters, the big experiences. And, a lot of theaters are really hurting. A lot of chains are falling by the wayside. That could be the dark day for theaters when companies like Disney, Paramount, whoever says, not going to play ball with you guys anymore. We're going to go with our own channel, get eyeballs on our stuff, and we'll see what happens. It's going to take a lot of guts for somebody to do that because you do have a lot of risk there. But somebody will eventually decide that the reward is worth it. Mark my words. It's on this podcast. This is a Rob Prediction original.
Yeah, okay, Rob.
Right there with the hoverboards and flying cars and clothes that adjust to you and
pizza you can throw in an oven and it's big right away. Anyways, so our bonus movie, the number 11 adjusted for inflation film.
Oh boy.
Number 11.
Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
No.
Damn.
I don't even know where that would be in the list.
Oh, it's way down the list. I like that movie, though.
Which is very odd, because this is as contemporary as I could get, and it's a repeater kind of on the list.
Okay.
Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
Fair enough.
And that, adjusted for inflation, is already just only in 11th place. So that's quite an accomplishment there. And getting back to the competition, the movie came out 2015, I should quickly mention, and then its total box office intake domestically is $936 million. It's been already adjusted for like $974 million.
Yeah, it's not a huge amount.
But the average ticket price, again, average $8.43, which
Sure.
$8 is roughly what the Fond du Lac Theater prices are.
Well, you're going up against, on the one side, you've got the big city expensive seats,
$13.
and then you've got the Tuesday matinees at Small Town USA.
Yeah.
So, and in addition to that, they probably even factor in some rounded estimate for small town schools and stuff that had showings and things like that too, for $2 or whatever. But still, that's pretty huge for a modern movie to show up on this list without all of the advantages all these classic movies have had.
Now talk about the competition, though.
Sure.
Remember, this is where the competition really changes too.
I don't know about that.
When I say competition, I mean like your entertainment value dollar.
Sure.
I mean, you got people that would probably be, well, I could watch whatever on TV. You got home theaters then. Back then, I had a home theater at home.
Here's the thing, though. Until that gap can't be overcome completely until they start streaming the movie at the same time you can see it in the theaters. And they were careful to preserve that gap for this reason.
But the point is, people...
There's other things to do.
Yeah, there's other things to do. That got the people who would normally do these various other things go to the movie. Because when I went to one, I think I saw it 5 times in the theater.
Yeah.
One of those 5 times, Neil and I, for whatever reason, the people behind us were talking about something, to us, and they mentioned the last movie they ever went to was Star Wars in 1977.
Wow.
So, I don't know what they were doing for those several years, but whatever.
Well, it's like me. I'm not a huge movie watcher. It takes a lot to get me out, but I saw The Force Awakens.
You got TV, Blu-ray, DVDs, Netflix, video games are big, phones don't even mean the same thing as they used to. I mean, our kids are all about 10-minute YouTube videos and 2-hour movie. They ain't got time for that.
But I think that is a good way of highlighting exactly how Star Wars, as much as we talked about it changing the landscape, the cultural landscape, the moment that it leveraged that grip that it has on people, on its fans, or even on people just curious to see what was going to happen with this venerable franchise, with all these people, and with all the original actors that we knew were in it. It sucked you in. You had to go and see it. It was that movie of that time that you had to go to see.
And for it to be number 11 in that adjusted range, that's
just huge.
Big.
Yeah.
That's big.
Now imagine if down the road they have re-releases on that in a similar venue. Say they have a victory lap in theaters across and give it another chance at getting huge box offices and that. It'll break the top 10.
It could.
It could.
Yeah, they'd have to really do some massive I think the best way to do a Star Wars celebration like that is release the saga films, as they call them, 1 through 9, 1 month apart from each other, and be, knock off a couple dollars for the average price, and
remember, Disney respects their IPs. I could easily see them going back and doing this. As I said, it's a victory lap for them because they have it. They can show it off just the way they want, and if they wanted to, unless there's contractually some reason they couldn't, they could even give some of the fans what they wanted and have original Star Wars viewings without the special edition stuff if they wanted to see that. They could do whatever they want.
Rumor is it's contract.
It probably is.
Or, guys, I'll let you buy Star Wars, but you got to do the special editions that I left with.
Yeah. Who knows?
All right, Mr. Iger, Star Wars.
I trust Disney's lawyers could probably figure out how to get around that. They probably could, but they'd only do it if it was marketable.
Hey, Mr. Bob Iger, Lucas, he could die and you wouldn't know if we made these things.
Okay, Back to the Podcast does not speculate on Disney whacking anybody, especially George Lucas.
Yeah, only if Neil were here to make future predictions like he does at our game nights.
Oh, yeah.
And he's usually right. Ooh. Anyway, you mentioned earlier, where did Ben-Hur fit into the adjusted? Number 14.
Sure.
Its equivalent for now is $883 million.
Yep. Again, cinematic great. Eventually, obviously eclipsed by the Ten Commandments, probably because it had more showings in theaters.
It could be.
But Ben-Hur had that big re-release was a redo, so it wouldn't have counted.
Right.
So
yeah. And then
honestly, that the Ten Commandments and Cecil B. DeMille and all that, it deserves a big place on cinematic history, no doubt about it. Any other surprises on your list that you are looking through now, Dave?
Let's see. Avatar's number 15, snooze fest. Jurassic Park is
we're a little bit biased against Avatar, but.
I find any of the Disney movies like Fantasia, I find that just phenomenal. Only because that was gearing towards kids. Kids definitely didn't have a whole lot of entertainment stuff to choose from, really.
Well, the other thing too, though, was that the nice thing about Fantasia was that it was solid for kids and adults. The scoring for that was amazing, and even though a couple of things were lighthearted for the kids, there was some pretty entertaining stuff for adults too. The fight with Chernabog and there was really great stuff, and the reimagining for Fantasia 2000 was really good too.
Cleopatra, 1963, that did $600 million. And I bring up Cleopatra because I could probably fit along the Ben-Hur type Ten Commandments style, Absolutely. Which is in that time frame, which is what you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Movies starting to kind of do similar things.
Yep.
Let's see. Blazing Saddles, number 56. Its equivalent is $569 million.
Obviously, that's the best Mel Brooks movie.
I see Airport, not Airplane. Airport is at number 50, $500 million. And now I'm just estimating numbers here. I'm not being exact.
Okay.
And Towering Inferno.
Oh, yeah.
Another $550 million movie. And those right there are similar themes, similar things. That was the thing back in the 70s. People wanted to see those disaster movies. Which one came first? I'm not looking at that now. Whatever.
So looking back through these lists is pretty fascinating. Putting things in place and context helps us to understand our history, not just of movies and cinema, but also human history or cultural history. Especially we're looking at all domestic numbers, so that certainly looking at American history, this does help to put things in context as well.
Yeah,
it's time that. We let you get back to your things until next time when we bring you back to the podcast with Dave and Rob. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and let us know what you think. We would be more than happy to listen to your requests and put out more content that you enjoy. Thank you and have a wonderful day.